Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Long Game Podcast with myself, Ben Scallon, and my esteemed co-host, Jason Osborne. And today we're going to be talking about a number of key issues. We'll be talking about the passing of Pope Francis just yesterday, the day after Easter Sunday. Interesting timing for him to go. I'm sure
Indeed.
he's happy that he at least made it to that milestone. We're going to be touching on the poll that RTE itself did on how much people trust them and the value that people perceive RTE to have in society. And we're also going to be talking about some video game news as far as its cultural impact, the game Oblivion, and the fact that there is a remake coming of that from, is that Bethesda to do that? I don't know.
Yeah, they did. No, I just Oblivion has spawned so many memes and so much internet culture. We have to take the opportunity to touch on it while it's relevant.
Yeah, I think that should be an interesting one, even if you're not into video games, because this is what the male population of Earth is consuming. So it has direct
Youths.
cultural relevance. But kicking off with the most timely of all of those stories, the passing of Pope Francis. I think this is sort of a significant story for us in particular as religious people. Obviously, Jason and I are Catholic, and not only are we Catholic, Jason, but we're Catholic converts. And so since I've come to the faith and you've come back to the faith, really, I've never known a pope other than Pope Francis. This is
Yeah.
sort of like the end of an era for me personally, and I would have converted when I was about 17 years old, and
Mhm.
and then I think I was baptized several years after that. So yeah, this is going to be a big shift. I've never been a practicing Catholic under anybody else, so whoever it ends up being, that'll be kind of give you a whiplash almost a little bit. How are you feeling in the wake of that incident?
Yeah, I must say I was surprised by how shocked I was because, as you've just outlined, similar to yourself, I reverted into the faith back in 2017 or so. I had been a genuine fedora tipping atheist before that, as in genuinely insufferable. If religion came up in a conversation, I couldn't let it slide. I had to tell someone why they have to drop that Stone Age BS. But to get back on topic, yeah, I was surprised by how sort of shocked I was by it because my wife and I had just gone to Easter Monday Mass, and the text started coming through about 10 minutes into that, and genuinely I got a good number of them. And then yeah, it was all quite momentous. Certainly, if I mean the global media is covering it big time, but certainly if you're Catholic, because it was just a regular old mass, and then the deacon whispered it to the priest during mass, and he at the end of the sort of prayers of the faithful, he added it in. So, and that as I said in an article yesterday, sort of sent people glancing around the church and things because it's a big deal. So, I was pretty shocked by it, and much like yourself, coming back in 2017, I've only ever been in the church under Pope Francis. I've read the writings, not all of the writings, but I'm familiar with, say, the thought of Pope Benedict, and I greatly valued his contribution to the church. Same with John Paul II. Same with some of the papal documents of previous popes. But obviously, Pope Francis is the pope that I would be most familiar with, especially given that before I worked with Gript, I worked with the Irish Catholic. So I genuinely was reading what Pope Francis was up to nearly every day for about 4 years. So I do feel John outlined in his article on Pope Francis yesterday that he couldn't really understand the concept of having a relationship with the Pope. But I must say that at this stage, yeah, I did have some sort of sense of it. I don't think he has to know you personally in order to sort of feel that feel that connection that Catholics are known to have.
Yeah, like one of the things that I find most amazing about the Catholic faith, and before people, I appreciate and understand that not everybody who watches this is Catholic or even
Mm-hmm.
necessarily religious. There's probably some atheist watching this who's fuming, thinking, "What the hell is this?" I tune in to hear about politics and culture and so on. I would just say to those people that Catholicism is a huge part of the world and Irish culture in particular. You think about history and the traditions that this country is rooted in from a Catholic perspective, and you're talking about an organization of over 1 billion people. Like if we were in a Muslim country, you wouldn't have to be Muslim to think that. the king of Saudi Arabia dying was important and significant for the Muslim world, that kind of a way.
Mm.
So even from a purely secular, natural perspective, this is an ancient institution that impacts many hundreds of millions, billions of people all
Well,
throughout.
I would add here maybe slightly bullishly as well, just that sort of this idea has gotten out that religion ought to be a private thing, but sort of secularism has the use of the public square and priority there, and it's kind of like, well, secularism makes a whole bunch of presuppositions about the way the world works and sort of structure society based on that. So I would say, religious people, Catholics and otherwise, have as much right to share their perspective on the world as anyone else. And I think that's a perspective that is woefully missing from Irish public discourse.
Yeah, well, I think that one of the ways in which as a religious person I would feel connected to the Pope is I've always thought about how when I was baptized as an adult, the priest puts his hands on you, you go through the ceremony, the RCIA and everything. And I think about how when he was ordained as a priest, that was done by a bishop, which was done by an archbishop, and so on and so forth, going up to the Pope, and then the Pope received his position from his fellow cardinals, and that in a way, through space and time, it's almost like that laying of hands could be traced all the way back to the first apostles in the
Yeah.
age of our Lord. So in a weird sense, that moment when you're baptized or when you receive communion or any of the sacraments is almost physically linking you like a chain of hands 2,000 years back into the past to St. Peter. I just, from that perspective, when I look at the Pope, even though it's somebody I've never met and I have no direct personal relationship with, I just think, damn, like this person is part of such an ancient institution that they
Yeah.
really are like a living link to the past. And so yeah, to answer John's query there as to how could you feel connected to a Pope, that's I've always felt that the ancient grandeur of it is really significant.
100%. And maybe to speak a little bit about Pope Francis himself, because there was many, I do like speaking about it in this terms, but this is the way it was very much portrayed. This idea of sort of he was at the center of a culture war in the church, and I don't think that's an entirely accurate framing, but I do think that there were certainly very different opinions around him. I think, so he's the first Latin American pope. That was very notable, and he was,
First American Pope ever from that
yeah,
entire hemisphere of the world, so
yeah.
far as I know.
No, that's exactly right. And he did an awful lot to sort of expand the profile of the church hierarchy. So he rammed cardinals through into the College of Cardinals. So there's more cardinals now from Africa, from Asia, from Latin America, from all over the place than there has been at any other point in church history. Um, a lot of people accused him of sort of stacking it with progressive cardinals, and certainly some of them might be able to be mapped that way in terms of their views. But I'm very much of the opinion that you can't apply modern political labels to this 2,000-year-old institution. Like, it just breaks down. I saw a priest tweeting earlier about how people keep referring, even the secular media keeps referring to Pope Francis as this sort of like liberalizing or progressive pope, whereas they'll refer to Trump as like fascist. Whereas this priest pointed out that Trump is to the left of Pope Francis on a bunch of issues like abortion, contraception, supporting the family and things like this, all of these different things. So like a lot of these, just I suppose, modern political labels don't apply. So the article that I wrote yesterday, because I was doing it very much on sort of spur of the moment, I was essentially saying that I don't think he had a perfect papacy, but I don't think there is such a thing as a perfect papacy. I think he made mistakes. Like, to give a couple of examples, I think the same-sex unions blessing debacle of sort of the end of 2023, if I remember the timing right, should have and could have been avoided. I think that He,
Sorry to interrupt you, but on that, you may well know more about this than I do, and I am very much open to correction. And indeed, if anybody in the comments knows more about this subject, then feel free to correct me. But it's my understanding that he gets a lot of he got a lot of stick and blowback because he said that what people say about him is that he was running around blessing gay unions or that he allowed that to happen. My understanding is that he absolutely didn't, and that what he said was, if you're a gay individual and you come forward, I will bless you as an individual in the same way I would bless anybody else. Anybody is entitled to God's blessing, and I'm more than happy to give it. Whatever union you guys have going on between you is nothing to do with me, and that part I will not bless because it's contrary to
yeah.
this religion. But that as for blessing individual people, no problem. Everybody can have God's bless. That kind of way. Which, if you're a
Yeah.
secular person or an atheistic person listening to this, you're going to say, "Who gives a rat's? It's all imaginary." That's your view. That's fine. But within the context of this religion, if you take
Yeah.
belief seriously, I think that's a pretty reasonable compromise if that is indeed what happened, which is
I think the whole thing was that there was a lot of confusion around it because like there was yeah, he made sort of, statements that appeared to say backtrack and things, but then there was also the fact that the word union was continuously used. It was the idea that it wasn't just individuals, it was sort of the couple and things like this. But not to don't want to get too much into theology around it, but it's all just to say that like that, and then the whole thing with the people maybe heard about the synod because it was reported on pretty widely, and I think that was in essence a big waste of time and effort because the vast majority of people, both practicing and non-practicing, now that it's concluded, are none the wiser as to what it actually was and have no idea what the outcomes were. So that and the fact that he didn't overly succeed in sort of making the church, like say, cleaning up church accounting, uh, finalizing sort of transparency in the Vatican and all of these things. But this is not at all intended to sort of just speak down about the man. I made the point that it's really hard to be Pope, and it's way easier from that position, given it's such an esteemed and lofty position, to criticize that which is done wrong than to praise that which is done right. And he did an awful lot of things right as well. And I think a lot of the things that he did well and spoke out on were like woefully underreported because we live in sort of such a outrage culture. So overall, like I really just grew in appreciation of the man over time, and I actually think that time will probably be kinder to him than um, I think the church was sort of ready for at present. Again, that doesn't mean at all that he did a perfect job, but I just think that he ran the race to the end, to put it as I put it in the article, and as Saint Paul put it.
Yeah, I mean, there's all, and again, like you don't want to, like, as soon as somebody dies, suddenly start rattling off all the mistakes they made as if that's what defines them. It's not really in good
Mm-hmm.
taste. But I'm only saying this to say that, like, I understand. I don't want to minimize the criticisms of him as far as the Pachamama incident or these different things that were genuinely very controversial and for good reason. There's all these things that you can point to. Is many people objected to his handling of the Latin Mass and so on and so forth, and I appreciate and understand all of that. But I was saying, we were having a conversation this morning about it all, and I was saying how it is notable to me that, putting some of those issues aside, many of his most vociferous critics from within the church are ultra traditionalist, so-called rad trad Catholics, and I would consider myself to be a traditional Catholic in the sense that I would be on the conservative wing of the
Well,
church.
you're orthodox, to put it just very simply.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to see radical innovation of the way things are done. I don't think that theologically, at least, the church has to reform its teachings on this and that issue.
Mm.
So I'm sympathetic to those views, but I think a lot of people, particularly online, who
Yeah.
identify as radical traditional Catholics, they'll talk all day and night about the importance of monarchy and the authority of the church and how it's so important to be obedient and to submit to church hierarchy and authority and all of this. And then the minute the Pope their rightful authority says something that they dislike or comes out with a teaching that they're not too keen on, they'll immediately go into rebellion and obstinate pushback and say, "Oh no, no, that's the Pope is terrible. The Pope is wrong. Blah blah blah. This, that, and the other." Obedience doesn't just mean you have to do what you're told when you feel like it or when you happen to personally agree. Like, just to give an example, like, and obviously we shouldn't be brain dead. We shouldn't turn off our reasoning ability and intellect and just slavishly do every single thing we're told. Obviously, you have to, you know, you have a brain for a reason and you should use it. But just to give an example, like, personally, I see merit to arguments for things like the death penalty. I'm not saying I necessarily fully
Want to
agree with it.
see? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but I can see I'd sort of be on the fence about it when you see really extreme, heinous crimes. Sometimes you'd go, "Is there any reforming this person, or should we just like do away with them?" But then the church, given that the church has now come out with a teaching on that and says no, Catholics cannot, in good conscience, support the death penalty. I'm willing to say I don't understand this or I don't fully agree with this, but I trust the combined wisdom and judgment of the church authorities and the church hierarchy over my own. So I'm going to put my own judgment in the back seat and say, all right, I'll go with what you say. So I am now, if people ask me, I am officially against the death penalty, specifically because it's in contrary to the teachings of my faith. So anyway, I'm not saying I'm fantastic or I'm perfect or that I'm always perfectly obedient. I'm not. But all I mean is, I think a little bit of humility and a little bit of looking at somebody like the Pope and giving them the benefit of the doubt as much as possible and trying to say, well, maybe he's aware of something I'm not, or maybe he's holier than me, or maybe he's wiser than me, and that's why I can't see where he's coming from. I think a little bit
Yeah.
of that would be
Well,
useful.
it is funny. This is a prime example because I think, and I don't have this like burned into my mind here, so I too might be open to correction. But I think this is sort of where, and I say this in sort of the utmost spirit of charity, some of the criticism comes from. That my understanding is that he didn't sort of dogmatically pronounce on, say, the death penalty. It was more so that he was sort of saying, as the Pope, but not again infallibly, that there's sort of no more justification for the death penalty. But there was a lot of pushback from sort of orthodox sources saying, well, like, it is morally justifiable in many circumstances. So it's but I suppose this is where sort of the criticism will come in, which is just that there was a lot of, say, confusion or sort of uncertainty introduced on different things, because Pope Francis did have a real sort of uh, knack is maybe the wrong way to put it, but a real tendency, I suppose, to speak off the cuff and things, which made him very endearing in many ways, but it also lent itself sort of confusing headlines and things in the wake of some of those statements. So I think where he really excelled was, yeah, definitely his pastoral approach. I think he was very clearly concerned about how best you minister to the person in front of you, and particularly to the people who wouldn't traditionally find themselves at the center, to put it that way, or whatever you might want to say. But someone asked me on Twitter, and I think it might be an interesting one to address, and I don't want to get into sort of like, I say, yeah, I really don't want to engage in sort of unpleasant speculation before the mourning period is passed, as it were, because certainly my wife and I are going to be praying over the next days, and I've been thinking, indeed, as I did yesterday, writing a lot about Pope Francis. But because obviously that mourning period will nearly be over by the time the next podcast comes out, someone was asking us about our opinions on sort of the next pope and what we think would be good for the church and what we think the moment kind of calls for. And um, I actually think a lot of people, particularly people that I would agree with on other things, don't think properly about this issue. I think that they only have a sort of view of what the Pope needs to say to the Western world in their head, because I think that the secular West is a unique context at the moment, and it isn't reflective necessarily of the rest of the world. And I think that they sort of neglect the fact that the church is genuinely a global institution. Like, the Pope is equally responsible for the church in all of the African nations, all of the Asian nations, all of the American nations. There's a heck of a lot more going on there than just is going on in Europe. Although obviously the Pope needs to be able to speak to that as well. So maybe throw it over to you first, lest I speak too much. What are your thoughts on this?
No, I couldn't agree more about what you just said, and I was actually just talking to my wife about this as well because obviously we've been discussing everything that's happened over the last 24 hours, and one of the points that I was making was how diversity, quote unquote, has become a trigger word on the right, and rightly so, because usually when you hear people talking about diversity, they're talking bullshit, for lack of a better word.
DEI, yeah.
Yeah, you're about to hear something infuriatingly stupid. But I think the Catholic Church is the one of the few places where it actually makes sense that you would kind of want and value that, because in an Irish context, let's say, just to take an example, in an Irish domestic context, if people go, "Oh, why is it that so many RTE presenters are, white Irish people?" You'd go, because Ireland is a white country for the most part in terms of the
Yeah.
demographic makeup of the country. So most everything are probably going to be white. So who cares? Like, get a grip. Like,
Yeah.
you don't land in Japan and then start complaining that there's a lot of Japanese people everywhere. Like, so
So some people do.
well, yeah, some people do, but in general, it's just moronic. But when you're talking about, as you say, a global, universal institution that represents billions of people and which is supposed to be a representation of the entire human race, then I actually would expect to see,
Yeah.
like, I want to hear the opinion and the input of Papua New Guinean Catholics and Argentinian Catholics and
Yeah.
Russian Catholics and people from all over the world, because they are an integral part. A purely European church or a purely American church or something would not
It's to
be
limit the church.
exactly. Yeah. So by all means, let's have more Filipino cardinals and more Indonesian cardinals and everything else. I don't.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
my primary.
new areas where I actually go, no, you know what, that's perfectly valid and legit.
But it's because it's like completely in keeping with what's known as the Great Commission, which is the idea that Christ literally sent the apostles forth to the disciples forth to spread the gospel to all four corners of the world. Like it's not supposed to be limited to Europe or to anywhere else.
All
That
four
a
corners,
tradition.
flat Earth confirmed,
Yeah, exactly.
right here on this podcast.
But no, it is like it's supposed to be everywhere and for everything, and I think yeah, the right primary concern to have is with maintaining orthodoxy, because like yourself, I'm not one of these people who thinks, oh, the church can be more progressive or it can be more conservative. I think there is orthodoxy and there isn't. And it's like, there is certainly theological development and thought and pastoral innovations in terms of how that's applied to people and things. But in terms of like the deposit of faith, that was given to us entirely in Christ, and it's just sort of being unpacked through time. So it's so I suppose with regard to the question of the next pope, yeah, I would like obviously to see someone who's theologically orthodox and doesn't look to introduce any sort of progressive, for want of a better way of putting it, innovations. Um, I
Sorry to interrupt. Do you think that the diversification as well of the church could almost lend itself to that in a favorable way? Because I don't know if you've ever received confession from an Indian priest, but they're 100% of the time, it's one of the best confessions I've ever had, where they're so on the ball. African priests the same. Like, basically, the point I'm making is the sort of liberalism or wishy-washiness is very much a phenomenon of the West,
yeah.
and when you take into account other regions and parts of the world, like, you're not going to get that sort of radical progressivism more than likely from an African pope.
Yeah.
Potentially that's what we had, or a Chinese pope or something. Like, no pope from China, if let's say you had a pope from China, no pope from China is going to come out with like a new, more favorable policy on transgenderism or something, just to give a crazy example, So
Yeah.
basically, my point being, you can almost say when it comes to a vote, the German weirdos being outvoted by the more faithful, traditional clergy from other parts of the world.
No, yeah, 100%. And just like a word of caution for viewers. I mean, as we both clarified, this is our first sort of like reigning papal death, I should say, because we obviously both Pope Benedict died just Pope Emeritus Benedict, I should say, died just the very very end of 2020, last day of 2022, if I recall correctly. And so this is the first time that we're sort of, going to be watching a conclave with interest in things. But as I say, I've reported on the Catholic Church for a couple of years, and so I know well, having read as much as I have about these things, that there is absolutely no point in following questions about papal favorites and things like this as to who is, because it could absolutely go anyway, the election process of the next pope. So uh, there's a famous sort of saying in journalistic circles, something about like the papal favorite goes into the conclave and comes out cardinal. So I really wouldn't be putting too much stock in any talk over the next couple of weeks of who's most likely to be the next pope. And I think there's just a big
Enoch Erg.
yeah. Well, yeah, he's as good a guess as anyone. Like with the way people are saying, here are the two contenders most likely to be pope. It's like, you read that, you should just see nonsense in your head. Like, no one knows. I mean, they may well end up being one of them, but in the same way that anyone could end up being it. So, um, I mean, I certainly have cardinals whose thought and whose contributions I've greatly valued um, over the past couple of years. Like, we've spoken before, I'm sure, about it. So many have in these circles. I do really like, Cardinal Sarah, again, an African, a West African cardinal. Very much like another, I think he's the president of the sort of Union of the African Bishops' Conferences, Cardinal Ambongo. Which again, some of the cardinals' names sound like they were written by J.K. Rowling. Like, you've got Cardinal Ambongo, you've got Cardinal Pier Battista Pizzaballa, from who's the Latin patriarch of the Holy Land. But these are all like really solid men. So there's a I the bottom line, I think, is the most useful thing to do at this time for Catholics is to pray about the next pope. Like, not so much to be speculating, but if I had to add things that, just using my reason, I think would be good to see in the next one. I think, yeah, sort of real moral clarity on issues that there's a lot of confusion over at the moment. Like, yeah, as Pope Francis offered on like gender ideology, on abortion, on the breakdown of the family, but also on things like, human sexuality, on uh, whatever else. But yeah, the encroaching secularism, or the growing secularism, as Pope Benedict was very good on. I think just real clarity and orthodoxy on these things is precisely what the world needs, and also a real adherence to the principle of like subsidiarity, which is sort of allowing the domestic churches in all of these different countries to do their thing, provided they're not going wildly off the rails in any way, as sort of some aspects of the church in Germany has over the past couple of years, with sort of trying to democratize various processes that absolutely shouldn't be.
Yeah, and I think as well, any good pope is probably going to piss off both the most extreme wings of the church,
Yeah,
which
definitely.
is, obviously you shouldn't set out to antagonize anybody, but I think that's because we've discussed this before, how I believe Christianity in general, but Catholicism in particular, since that's what we're talking about here, is intrinsically anti extremism, in the sense that it's all about balancing legitimate rights that people that have been enumerated by the deposit of faith and by the magisterium and so on, and the Bible, and etc etc, that the church acknowledges that nations have a right to exist and enforce their borders. So the church is never going to go in the radical open borders, let anybody just wander in off the street. That can never be endorsed. But then at the same time, it also acknowledges that we have obligations to take care of people who are in danger and be good
Yeah, yeah.
citizens and help people. So the church is equally never going to endorse a policy where you say, no, we're not letting anybody in. And if any refugee boats try to land, we're going to shoot them with anti-aircraft missiles. And like, that's you can't do that. And then there's people on the radical right and the radical left who would be pissed off by that if a pope
Yeah.
come out and say, no, actually, you do have to take, to a reasonable degree that you can, you do have to help a certain amount of people who are in legitimate danger. And, you can make sure you're not being ripped off. You can enforce your borders, but you have to be charitable and do what you can.
It's precisely that.
Lots of people
Yeah.
are not going to want to hear that, but that is the correct Catholic position that goes right down the middle of both.
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's ultimately like the church ought not to care about appealing to camps. It's supposed to be, yeah, charitable, as you say, like as Christ was charitable. And I mean, we saw how that ended for him. So there's no wonder if that results in baying mobs on every side, because that's precisely how things ended for him. But suffice to say, yeah, no, I think it's a super interesting time. Yeah, this period now is known as a uh, sede vacante, which is that the chair of Peter is empty, is vacant. And yeah, it's an extraordinarily unusual time for Catholics, because that's not supposed to be, certainly in the modern age, it's not supposed to be prolonged. There's a lot of procedures in place to sort of move things along to the election of the next pope. But yeah, it's an unusual time, because even some of the prayers that my wife and I pray in the morning and things like that would include sections for the Pope's intentions, say, and you get to that and it's like, gosh, there's no Pope at the moment. It's really unusual. So yeah, we're going to spend the next couple of days certainly praying for Pope Francis, and then after that praying for yeah, the Holy Spirit's guidance for the conclave, because yeah, whoever the next person is, you plan on getting behind them with prayer and things like that, much as we did with Pope Francis, and just obviously pray that they're doing God's purpose in that most important seat.
Well, you just know that the Reddit atheists who might watch this podcast, all five of them are seething and fuming. So we might put them out of their misery and move on to a subsequent topic, which is a little.
Our approval rating now our trust rating will have dropped lower than RGE's now.
Yes, indeed, absolutely. Because as many people will have seen, that we have a new poll on the trustworthiness of RTE in the opinion of most of the general public, and I was a little bit perplexed by these figures, Jason. I've been looking forward to discussing this with you because, we believe in democracy here. We believe in, at least when it comes to secular society, that the people should have their say and the people should get what they want effectively, but it's not always clear what do the people want. And you sometimes wonder, do they even know themselves when you hear figures like this, that newly released data compiled for RTE encompassing the final months of 2024 show that just 40% of the public perceived that RTE was trustworthy, while 81% maintained that RTE is valuable to Irish society. So that leaves about 41% of people who don't think RTE is trustworthy, but they do think it's valuable to Irish society. So I would love to sit down and interview one of those people and just say, what's going on, big guy? What do these figures mean, and what are we to intuit from this polling?
Yeah, then you find out he doesn't even engage with RT. Like, he only reads the Irish Times and the Journal and things. But I imagine.
You're like, you know what? It's pure propaganda and lies, but there's actually a role for that in society. I think that's important. So some lies need to be protected.
I do think, yeah, I mean, it is funny, as you say, the absolute mystery of the Irish public in many ways. I mean, I think that every time you get one of these Ipsos polls from the Irish Times, it's like, I feel like every time these come out, it's literally just the reverse results of last time. It's like, I don't know, Fianna Fáil might be on top, followed by Fine Gael, followed by Sinn Féin, and then, I don't know, 5 months later, another poll will come out, and Sinn Féin will be up at the top, and Fianna Fáil, and then Fine Gael at the bottom. It's like, I feel like it just depends on what day of the week you ask people what they think, and they'll get back to you based on that. I mean, we heard from one sort of veteran person involved in sort of campaigning and things, that the one thing that she's learned over the course of decades engaged in public life is that you can't predict the electorate. There's no sort of profiling them nearly. Um, so if I'm going to look at this figure charitably, say, I'm going to say that the 40% of the public who had the perception that RT overall is trustworthy. Well, I'm going to say that's reflective of the fact that the vast majority, 60% of people now, uh, don't think that it is, and that's based on a whole bunch of factors, whether that's sort of the RT transparency issues of recent years, or the, what a lot of people perceive to be the biased reporting and things like that. Whereas, like, say, the 81% saying that RT is valuable to Irish society, maybe they're not making a comment about RT at the moment, but more so the institution itself. Like, I mean, I could certainly see the value in having a public broadcaster if it was broadcasting anything worth broadcasting, which by and large it unfortunately isn't these days. So I think it might be a case of a lot of people not being willing to throw the baby out with the bathwater or something like that. That's the only way I can make sense of this, because if I think about it any other way, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, there. I suppose, like, I often don't think of this when I'm thinking about RTE because I would never consume their content in this regard. But they do produce alleged entertainment, if you can call it that. But that, some people apparently find it entertaining. They have sporting, coverage and so on. So
Mm.
you could maybe imagine that somebody's like, oh yeah, I really like, Fair City, and I like
Right.
their
I really like the publicly broadcast Angelus at six p.m.
yeah, exactly. Well, when it comes to their news coverage, I wouldn't trust them as far as I can throw them, or something like that. I don't know if that's what's going on there, but I do think it's noteworthy as well that just looking at these figures, like in mid 2024, it was as low as 37% of people said they were trustworthy. Then later in the year, that went up to 45%, and then it went down to 40%. So we're hovering around that sort of zone. So
Well, I say by and large that spike was because people forgot that they don't find it trustworthy.
yeah, but either way, I do think it's notable that we're all forced to pay for this, despite the fact that the majority of people are not willing to say that they find it trustworthy. That it's
Yeah, it's
still
amazing.
something that we are forced by law on pain of imprisonment to fund for the privilege of having a television.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I did find it funny in that article, because obviously these were released under the FOI Act to a postdoctoral sociologist who's writing a book on public service media. And I always find it funny when RT is sort of reporting on its own transparency issues and things like this, because there's a paragraph in it. It was like, in the letter releasing the data from RT dated 13th of January, it states that the information is being released in the spirit of openness and transparency. It's like, all right, RT, we see your openness and transparency. Thanks for that. But so yeah, the figures speak for themselves. Like, it's as you say, the vast majority of people don't see RT as being trustworthy currently. And I think, again, the only way I can make sense of this is if that sort of 81% maintain, even though it's phrased maintained that RT is valuable to Irish society, it's kind of this idea of nearly putting up with its untrustworthiness, to sort of see that there is some potential value to a public service broadcaster. And again, I could be sympathetic to that perspective, because I think if they were broadcasting, actual quality, uh, moral Irish content, um, I'd be happy to pay for it. But as it stands, I'm not. Why would I?
Yeah, not to turn this into the Catholic headbanger controversy episode, but
Too
is
late, too late, I think.
yeah, that ship may have sailed. I don't. I think that ship sank. So, but well, with that said, I know Amy De Valera is a figure of great controversy in this country, but I have time for him, to be honest. And I
Yeah.
remember there's that video that it's of him when RTE was being first launched and created, and he was doing a national address to the country about this newfound organization and broadcaster RTE. And I thought it was such a good point he made. I'm paraphrasing. Obviously, I haven't memorized his address from 1960, whenever this came out.
Yeah, if you hadn't got married, you might have memorized it, but
Yeah, yeah. But he effectively said in a nutshell that this will produce what the people of Ireland wanted to produce. So if we produce a great, virtuous society of people who demand beauty and culture and sophistication, then that's what it will give to us. And if we become a vicious society that vicious in the sense of having vice and being bogged down in horrible slop, then it will give us horrible slop because that's what we asked for. And so he pretty much said, we're setting this up and now the ball's in your court, and you as the people of the nation will make it what it is. So don't come crying to me in 50 years if it ends up as a disaster, because that's your fault. He didn't say that,
like
but that was the subtext. And I thought absolutely true and pretty cool that he would have the moxie to say it in less
yeah.
words.
I do sometimes think this is potentially going to be very controversial, but I do sometimes think that the most realistic path to renewal in Ireland is genuinely something like making the Irish establishment great again, in this kind of idea of cultural renewal within the organizations that are already there. Like, yeah, in line with what you're saying, sort of about in line with what we've been saying about RT, that if it was broadcasting in a completely different direction, then of course you could see the value of something like that. But the fact is that it isn't, and so I think it's an absolute nuisance at the moment, to put it politely. But it
Yeah,
is like,
sorry to cut you off there, but just like briefly on that very point, like this is a kind of a slight tangent, but it's very directly related to what we're talking about as far as like how what we consume contributes to what is then produced because you're incentivizing it. That there are these channels on YouTube like drama and gossip type channels where I'm not going to name the channel because I don't even want to send any attention there, and they're already huge. It's not like me endorsing them is going to give them any, like they have millions of views. So who cares what I say about them? But still, you'll see these videos. If anybody is like a young person or a person who's on YouTube a lot, you'll know what I'm talking about. Where it's like the satisfying downfall of blank, or
yeah.
Andrew Tate, who I dislike, by the way, so I'm not defending him, but like Andrew Tate is finished now, and then the picture is
Yeah.
looking like terrified, and it's like it's the end, is like the thumbnail, or whatever
Yeah.
kind of thing. And like they'll do this for loads of people, like celebrities and YouTubers and different people. And I remember I was like, I saw one of these videos come up and it like piqued my interest or caught my attention, and like I was watching it. And I didn't even like the person who was in it. It was somebody like Andrew Tate. I don't think it was him, but it was somebody like that who I don't really have a lot of time for. But then I went on the channel and I was scrolling down through their videos, and I realized literally every single one of these videos is dedicated to humiliating somebody or tearing them down. And even if the people who you're specifically talking about are genuinely bad actors who should be called out, there's something kind of pathetic about your entire presence online just being dedicated to pointing out problems with other people and criticizing them. Like if you ask this guy who runs this channel, don't criticize other people, just make content on your own, he'd literally have nothing to talk about. He would have nothing constructive to add. If there's not somebody to tear down, he has nothing to say. And so I know that's a massive bizarre tangent from what we were just talking about with RTA, but the only reason I bring that up is these videos get millions and millions of views because people are looking for shitty little gossipy, nasty,
Yeah.
oh, hey, that person, oh, they forgot to pay their taxes and now
They
they're
got
going
him
to
now.
jail. Yeah, like, and it's like, you're kind of a loser if you're just sitting, if your entire life consists of you sitting there preying on the downfall of other people, rightly or wrongly, you kind of suck as a person. So, yeah, I think when it comes to RTA, when it comes to YouTube, social media influencers, all of that, if you're noticing a lot of garbage in media, it's our faults collectively as a society for asking for pure garbage and for clicking on it and for watching it and so on and so forth.
No, definitely, and I think this applies in a whole load of ways. It's like, yeah, you essentially get what you're looking for, no matter what side of the spectrum you find yourself on, which is why sort of as we would say, the sort of down the middle, aiming at goodness, truth, and beauty are the only way to build anything worth conserving, even to put it that way. But and it's kind of to tie back to that, which I was saying about making yeah, to put it that way, making the establishment great again, to put it like that. I feel like a lot of those institutions that were built by, you'd nearly say men of a higher caliber than we in the year 2025. Like, I always come back to the things like, no Irish party has been started with a name like Fianna Fáil, like Soldiers of Destiny, uh, or like Fine Gael, Tribe of the Gaels. It's like, it's always like, and people can be annoyed if they want, but it's like Ireland first, you know, the national party. It's like the sort of the artistic background to these things, just the depth just isn't there.
Well,
And so I sometimes,
is that the fault of the parties, or is that the fact that the public have changed to the point where the public wouldn't vote for a party
oh
called the the nation of, like, I suppose, isn't there that party, the Irish people? That's sort of in the same vein, and
uh,
you get a couple of them here or there, but I think a lot of people today don't like that, which is not the fault of. You almost have to go for a more simple name, because
yeah.
if you went for something too poetic and grand, the public would be like, "Yeah, I don't like that," you know.
No, there's some truth to it, but I also think that, and again, I'm not necessarily advocating anything here, but I'm just saying sometimes I think that down this direction, that a more fruitful approach probably will be culture change in future within pre-existing things in Irish society, like RTE maybe, because certainly the wind, as we've discussed many times on this podcast, the winds aren't going to be blowing in the direction that they've been blowing in for the past decade forever. Things are going to change in a different direction, and I think yeah, that will ultimately end up affecting every institution, because it's not like, I understand these institutions are sort of progressive bastions and strongholds at the moment, but there were a lot of, say, to put it this way, traditional or conservative bastions in Ireland a couple decades ago, and where are they now? It's like these things change when the zeitgeist changes. So that's even slightly tangential as well, but just to say that I sometimes do find myself thinking in that direction. But speaking of artifacts of great cultural note and um, that have I'll be honest with you, I don't honestly know what to say about Oblivion. I enjoyed it greatly, greatly as a what age was I when I played it? I think I must have been like I played it over a span of a couple of years because I enjoyed it so much. I guess I must have been like 13 to, like, I don't know, 16 or 17 on and off. I'd be playing it. But that game, like, between the fact that it have you ever played it?
Oh yeah, for sure. All those, like, Elder Scrolls, clearly Skyrim.
Yeah.
Everybody and their granny has played Skyrim, but yeah, no, Oblivion definitely.
But I was just gonna say, like, between the fact that they only had like six voice actors for the for the whole thing that has like hundreds of characters, to the fact that it was glitched to pieces. Um,
The
but
glitches are
then as
more
well,
entertaining than the game itself.
yeah, I know. And then, like, half of the time you come across a video of Oblivion on YouTube now, it's like, yeah, people exploiting those to like kick the adoring fan across Cyrodiil and things like this. So it's like, but it's all just to say that I figured it was worth discussing, because we haven't actually touched on gaming at all so far in this podcast. And I used to be an avid gamer, and it's not like, because I know some conservatives are like, oh, it's an infantile activity and you should have no time for it. I actually disagree with that big time. I do think that it's potentially a massive drain of your time, because it's very tempting to devote way more time to it than it's worth. But I think by and large, it's, as sort of good as any leisure activity to engage in, really. Um, Within reason, but that's like the same could be said of any leisure activity. But I saw that Oblivion. I am completely out of the gaming loop these days, but this sort of broke into the mainstream, so I saw that Oblivion is being not just remastered but remade. And I believe today, probably by the time this comes out, it's probably going to have been announced or released. It's supposed to be dropping this week, I think. But yeah, I was going to ask you what your relationship with gaming is these days, and whether you had one at all previously. Although based on what you said, you have.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think you'd struggle to find a man in our age demographic who did not grow up on video games and didn't play it until their hands had arthritis at the age of 16. So yeah, that certainly would have been me. But and I still dabble here or there, but mainly Grand Theft Auto 5 with about a
Oh
thousand
yeah.
mods installed, so it's not even recognizable. It's not even the same game anymore. Like, there's, it's just bizarre. But with that said, I would be more of the view that it's negative than that it's a positive. And I say that even as somebody who still participates in it from time to time. But
Mhm.
I kind of, it's one of those things where I acknowledge if I stopped dabbling in it even casually, it would probably be better for me. Mainly because I think one of the main drivers of men to be successful is a desire to feel like you've accomplished something. Like, I'm sure everybody here has had this experience at some point, and like, including yourself.
As a
When
low testosterone individual, I'm going to preempt to say no. I probably haven't.
well, I'm thinking about. I remember one time it was actually Skyrim was the game I was playing years and years ago when that first came out, and I spent like an entire Saturday, almost hours and hours of my time, trying to level up my one-handed sword strike, and I was like just using a one-handed weapon the whole time just so that I could like level it up, and I just see the bar going up incrementally as I'm getting more and more experience. And then finally at the end I did it and I got to the level I wanted to. And I just kind of sat back and I thought, in all that time, I could have taken up fencing or something and actually learned how to fight sword. Like, I have this feeling of accomplishment, even though I've accomplished not one thing except cutting off circulation to my ass because I've sat here doing nothing the whole time. But so,
It was the same for me. I remember spamming like a smith blacksmithing in Skyrim. I genuinely spent like 2 hours just forging iron daggers because it was really easy to get the components that you needed to make them, and you could just make them over and over. And by the end of it, after making like 2 trillion iron daggers, you were able to make like Daedric armor and things like that.
but then again, you go like, I could have taken up a trade and I would have been paid for it, and I would know how to do metal work or something.
I could have made an actual suit of armor in the time that I was sitting here.
Yeah, literally. So I feel like it's harmful to men in the sense that it gives them a false, like, by the time, if you're not cognizant of that and you don't do it in a, you're playing games all the time. By the time you get to 25 or so, you feel like your brain on a subconscious level almost feels like you're this really accomplished guy because you've been to Vietnam, i.e., you played Call of Duty one time, or like Call of Duty World at War. Did you ever play that?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I was fighting on the Eastern Front with Red Knob, and we were doing all. I was like, no, you weren't. You were sitting there eating popcorn, like you did nothing. But kind of, I don't know. Like, I don't want to
Well,
be. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I've seen it formulated that, a lot of the healthy impulses that men have are neutered by these things. Like, say, a healthy sexual desire in a man in many ways, because that's completely natural, is neutered by pornography now. Then you've got like a healthy desire for adventure and adrenaline, and that's neutered now by video games. And there's 150% merit to that argument. That's why I sort of prefaced it by saying that I think that there's definitely a place for them, but it absolutely has to be limited. And like, you and I, again, this being the absolutely mad Catholic episode, I would take, like, I don't know, take someone like Carlo Acutis, who was supposed to be canonized this Saturday, but it's been since postponed because Pope Francis' death. He was into video games, but he realized just that addictive and counterproductive nature to them. So he would limit himself to like an hour on Friday, and so it's like I can completely see it as being a worthwhile pastime so long as it's kept in its place. This is kind of the whole thing, and the difficulty with them is that they are addictive, and it's so easy. Like because I had some great times playing games with friends in college and school and things like that, but I genuinely wasted so much time doing this. Like genuinely some sessions that were like 4 or 5 hours long and into like 3 in the morning in a PlayStation party or whatever with like 6 or 7 other guys. I wasted so many hours that could have, as you said, it could have been put to use doing something productive. So I enjoyed gaming, so like I wouldn't like to have, and I don't think there's any need to eliminate it entirely, but I wish I had like cut it by like 90% or something.
And you know what's crazy is if you had cut it by 90%, and if most of us cut it by 90%, we would actually enjoy it more. Because what's so weird, like I just recently deleted the Facebook app off my phone, because the only reason I had it was to follow a bunch of meme pages. And
Yeah, yeah.
I caught myself, I was like 50 pages deep on some meme page, and I was just looking at different memes, and I was like, I haven't even laughed at one of these. Like, they're not even that funny. You know what I mean? It'd be one thing because we all understand recreation is important. It's not a waste of time if you're actually recharging your batteries, which can
Leisure is the basis of culture, as they say.
absolutely, and it's so important. Like you can be more effective at work if you are well rested and you feel you're not a ball of nerves because you actually took some time off and you had some recreation. That's fine, but um it's not even like I'm sitting there pissing myself laughing, cackling because it's actually hilarious, and like at the end of it I'm breathless because I'm like, oh man, that was so funny. You just like
No.
you waste your life away just watching YouTube reels that aren't even funny or interesting and contribute nothing to your life. So nobody's saying don't enjoy yourself, don't have time off, don't have leisure, but when you've just done like when you were grinding to level up blacksmithing, was that even fun? Like, or you're like you're playing, I don't know, Fallout, and you're just running around shooting cockroaches with a shotgun or rad roaches?
Rad roaches.
Yeah, exactly. Like, is that fun if you're just like going through the motions to try and level up a virtual skill which you can't even then apply to real life? Like, it's not even enjoyable in and of itself. So it is just a pure utter waste of time, even from the perspective of leisure. So, yeah, doing less of it and doing it properly is actually even more fun than just wasting away an entire like week of your life.
Well, that's exactly it. Like, it's this idea that, yeah, by all means enjoy yourself and relax and things, but it's like actually enjoy yourself and actually relax. Don't just sort of dissipate on, yeah, endless scrolling and endless Skyrim grinding. Speaking of sort of Facebook meme pages and, Bethesda games and things like that, for the first time, because I actually agree, I think Facebook is a really good place for memes and humor if you get yourself into the right uh, digital space on there. And I just randomly came across a meme before I came onto this, because the way everyone talks about the way Skyrim has been released in about 1,200 editions at this stage. They're really milking that thing for all they can get. And the sort of promo image that they released for the Oblivion remake is the number 4 in Roman numerals, which is obviously like a V and an I next to
Is it
each other.
in a V?
An I and a V next to each other, yeah.
Look
Uh,
at this amateur hour. Doesn't even know it's
I
Roman numerals. But
I know it's because I was too busy making iron daggers in Skyrim. But I saw a meme
you've
there.
never
So
played a Rome Total War.
I actually haven't. I never had a PC or anything that. And I always loved like proper strategy games, but I'd only play them when I went over to a friend's house.
I
Um,
actually only know European geography from Napoleon Total War because like placing my troops on the Iberian Peninsula, and then you learn where things are in relation to other things because you're constantly getting attacked from this settlement, and then so then when I look at a European map, I can identify. Oh yeah, there's Corsica because I was fighting
but
that.
like
Right,
people might laugh at that, but it's like I think the number of people who don't know European geography would actually probably astound you. And so
people who think they know, and then they identify
I
where the
know
wave so and so is, and you're like not even
Portugal where Hungary is or something on the map. Yeah. But before I let this meme get too far, it was the Roman numerals. So the promo image was just the four in Roman numerals, implying obviously that this Oblivion remake was coming out. And then it was like, yeah, when the trailer is released, they just move the V up on top of the I, and it becomes the Y in Skyrim, and they're releasing another edition of Skyrim. It's like, but they have become a sort of shameless cash grab studio, but I admire them for it. And if I had a console that worked, I was saying to you before this, my PlayStation 4, which is the last console I had, died of old age recently because we only ever really used it now for um like watching Amazon Prime or HBO Max or whatever on it. But it won't even. I got it like 10 years. I think it was exactly 10 years ago for my 18th birthday or so. So it just died of old age. It just won't connect to a network anymore. It takes forever to open anything on there. So I find it hard to imagine I'm going to end up getting a PlayStation 5, although who knows what the future holds. But I suffice to say, I dare say I could be tempted by this remake, given that I sank so much time into it when I was younger. But at the same time, you know, I'm married, I have a full time job, kids. Could I use my time better? Am I really going to limit myself to 1 hour on a Friday evening? Who the hell knows?
Yeah, actually, that's a tip for any guys who are in our age range or younger who might be watching this. Even though, despite everything we've said about don't game, because it's a waste of time, actually do game every hour of the day you possibly can until you get married. Because after you get married, you feel like a
Ah,
real
yeah.
asshole. Like, especially when you have kids. Like me personally now, and I'm sure you agree and can relate to this. Like, even though you're allowed, like my wife would even say, like, you've been working really hard, take some time off, like just play some video games, but you feel like a real prick when you're a dad and your wife has to deal with the kids and everything, and you're just sitting there playing Total War like an idiot. Like, so
But
yeah.
there's no way to make it an honorable kind of thing. It's like even if the kids have gone to bed, which has been the case for me before, and my wife is asleep, it's like there's just something so sort of, I don't know, creaturely about crawling into bed in the dark after having been playing Civilization 6 for like 2 hours or whatever.
Yeah, there's nothing that can make that cool. Yeah,
You're like, okay, I'm losing sleep, but I at least destroyed American culture in this game. It's like in this game, it's like go to bed, man, for God's sake.
yeah, and even though your wife says, "Oh yeah, it's fine," like everybody's entitled to a hobby. I strongly suspect that they judge their man. Like I don't think I think she actually thinks less of me when I do give in and I play some video. Like if she catches me, she cannot have a lower opinion of me after that because she's like, you should be out like if I'm playing Grand Theft Auto, she's like, you could actually just be a tough guy and
You could be throwing your son up in the air right now or something.
exactly, yeah. Or if I was going to a shooting range, she'd be like, okay, that's kind of masculine. You can defend the house if we ever get attacked. But no, I'm running around with an AK-47 in the streets of Los Santos, and I might as well be wearing a little propeller hat with the
Yeah.
multiplayer, and.
No, yeah, she just sees that infantile glint in your eyes as she hands you the plate of chicken nuggets that she's oven chicken nuggets that she's made for you.
So yeah, not great. So yeah, maximize your gaming time. That's my official advice to young men, and doing it till your eyeballs bleed. So
Yeah. No, I would. No, we're obviously joking. So Star doesn't mean to go on. It's like if you're gonna do it, it's like I don't know, limit yourself to like an hour on Friday as China has imposed upon its citizens. It's like I remember seeing that a couple of years back, and I was like, gosh, the wonders of an authoritarian government. But our brand of soft totalitarianism in the Western world is more so like yeah. Get your wife to bring you the chicken nuggets and oven chips as you sit there in your underwear. As you sit there in your underwear.
all right. With that said, also I should acknowledge that we blatantly lied to you all last week. I said that we were moving the podcast date to Monday, and like a total jackass, I forgot that Monday was in fact a bank holiday. So clearly that didn't pan out. You're here.
And like a double jackass. We're no worse time of year to choose it. There's another bank holiday coming up in like 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, no, that was not well planned out. In case you can tell, this is a little bit ad hoc as far as how we plan our. I thought it was a smart move. You know, I would have thought it was well planned out, but clearly the logistics were not examined ahead of time. So we will be moving to Monday, I swear, going forward, but we will have to account for bank holidays and things of that. I was going to say unforeseen things, but actually that was totally
It's nothing more foreseen than a bank holiday.
yeah, yeah. Like I could have known that last year, let alone. So anyway, regardless, we look forward to seeing you all next week, next Monday again. This time for real, I promise. And we'll talk to you all soon. God bless.
Ben and I are going to go hop onto GTA Online now.
Everybody.
Bye bye.